Welcome to Browncoat Reviews. I'm your host, Laura. Now, the world of comics is as diverse as the people that read them. We all have our favorites that we love, and we have those that we love to hate. But the best times are had when we don't let those differences come between us, and instead celebrate those diversities. Now, if 5 years ago you would have asked me if I was a fan of comic books, my answer would have been no. I wasn't reading them. So clearly, if you're not reading the comic books, then clearly you don't like those comic book stories, right? Now, I grew up with both cartoon and movies of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Batman, X-Men. Then I got a little bit older, and now we kind of evolved to, the Star Trek, Star Wars, Power Rangers, get a little bit older again, go to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Firefly, and Agent Carter, and Daredevil, and then the ultimate creme de la creme, which I still didn't believe I was a comic book fan at this time. When my husband suggested for Valentine's Day that we should go see Deadpool in theaters, I said yes, absolutely. Not a comic book fan, nope. It was a great movie, and it's part of the reason that my husband and I are still fans of Deadpool, and we probably always will be. There are a lot of inside jokes that we have because of that movie and because we loved the first one so much. First movie. And yes, we have a ton of Deadpool comics. Now, my husband grew up with comic books. His older brother had given him a whole trash bag full of comic books, and of course he read them all. So he at least was more familiar with the stories in that world. I wasn't, but I was always open to it. So I remember when we went to our first Comic-Con, and then we went to the next one. So we went to the Bull City Comic-Con, which is over in Durham, North Carolina, and then we went to the Oak City Comic-Con, which is over here in Raleigh. And the Durham Comic-Con is definitely more focused in on the comic books and some of the artists. And the Raleigh Comic-Con is a bit more pop culture focused. So you'll see more celebrities. You'll see a lot more of the artists, but the artists won't just be doing, drawings. You'll have artists that do clay, steampunk, you'll have metalworkings. There was someone who did their own chainmail. And you also will get fans from every single genre. So me and my Harry Potter t-shirt, I can fit in because there were Harry Potter, whether it was memorabilia, there was stuff for Outlander, there was stuff for obviously anime, Pokemon, all these different stories, but everyone found something there that they could absolutely love. And I remember my husband had been telling me before we even went about this small publishing company called Zenescope. And Zenescope has always done a wonderful job of taking a traditional story that we all know, whether it's Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz, The Jungle Book, and they'll flip it on its head. So then what you expect from the story will suddenly get a nice little Zenescope twist. And my husband had read The Jungle Book, and he absolutely loved it. And I remember him mentioning it to me, and when we saw the booth, I'm like, we need to go check this out. And I was so excited because I'm like, I get to buy my husband comic books. But then I started looking at some of the titles, and I bought comic books for myself. For the very first time. It was great. And I absolutely consumed them, and I became an instant Zenescope fan. Now, one of the comic books that I purchased is this lovely little lady. This is Robin Hood. She is a female superhero. She kicks butt, she takes names. She obviously never misses with her bow and arrow because she's Robin Hood. But she's also incredibly sarcastic. So it was the first time that I was reading one of these comic books and I was sitting there giggling. And I flipped through the first one and something I needed to get more. Now, I think there comes a time in every comic book collector's life is that moment when you suddenly collect more than one cover for one issue. And I remember before this ever happened to me, I didn't understand it. Because why would you want more than one copy of the exact same comic book? Because you buy them to read them, so where's the fun in that? And I remember when the 80th anniversary issues of Catwoman was released. Now, for those of you that don't know, the 80th anniversary issues, what they did is each one of the 8 issues represented a different decade of Catwoman. And so, of course, they changed all the costumes, and then they showed the progression of this character over the 80 years. It was really cool. And there was one particular cover that my husband really wanted, and it had Lee Merriweather on it. Absolutely gorgeous. And it, of course, was the one that was selling out the fastest. So I remember we were calling around town to try and find it. And lo and behold, who has it but Ultimate Comics? So my husband went beelining it over to Ultimate Comics, got a hold of it, and of course came home and was just ecstatic. So when we looked it up, and of course we're staring at this cover, and it's gorgeous, we find out that the artist is a guy by the name of JScottCampbell. I thought it was amazing, and I remember looking up the artist because I was like, well, if we like this one, I wonder what else he's done. And I find out that on his website, he has exclusive variant covers that he releases through there and does not sell to the comic book shops. And he had done his own version of the 80th anniversary cover set. Okay, so the original 80th anniversary set was very good, but the JScottCampbell covers were phenomenal. And I remember looking at that set for weeks and drooling and thinking about it. And finally I pulled the trigger and said, happy birthday to both of us. We're getting Catwoman. And my husband and I were ecstatic when that box arrived and we opened it. And these covers, you see the detail in them, and you sit there and go, oh my gosh, this was worth every single penny. It was worth every single minute waiting for them. And instantly my husband and I became fans of JScottCampbell. So now, of course, I collect as much of his artwork as I can because I find his work incredibly impressive. But it was definitely a turning point as a comic book collector that now I'm paying attention to artists. And now getting more than one copy of a cover, especially if it's done by different artists, oh, it makes total sense. So I remember the next biggest misconception that I had about comic books was that I assumed that if you were reading comic books, it was either anime or it was about superheroes. And I remember my husband was talking to me about comic books and we were having a great discussion, and he kept suggesting that I come with him over to the Ultimate Comics location over in Raleigh. And he knows how much I love to analyze and read different stories. He's like, you need to talk to this guy named Dan. Dan is amazing. Dan does a great job of finding the story for you. You should just go in there and talk to him. So I remember talking to Dan about some of the things that I absolutely loved about my Zenescope, graphic novels, and some of the things that had really let me down. And he started making some recommendations. And as we were walking around the shop, he was pulling out this book and he'd show me, the artwork, and he'd be like, well, what do you think about this? And he would talk to me about the storyline and give me little teasers to see if it was something that I was interested in. And I remember the first question he asked me was, do you want superheroes or non-superheroes? So of course, I was like, well, let's try the non-superheroes. What have you got? And he brought out this comic book, Witches. The fact that Dan recommended this and the fact that I loved it so much is probably one of the millions of reasons why I will probably stay an Ultimate Comics fan for the rest of my life. Congratulations, Dan. You're stuck with me. So, Witches is written by Scott Snyder. It is a self-contained graphic novel, which I didn't know was a thing. I remember that night I was so excited, so we brought it home. My husband got his comic books, I bought my comic books, and I opened up Witches. I was like, okay, well, let's see if it's any good. We'll check it out. And I finished the first 2 pages, and I was glued. And I remember having to pause long enough to eat to then run back to opening and reading the comic book. I was that entranced with this story. And there was no sleeping until I had finished it. And I loved every single minute of it. I read every single interview at the end. There was just something about it that was unique. You had character development that again, I only thought you could achieve in a traditional novel or a movie, because you get that visual representation and you can see the characters go through those emotions. And I didn't think that a comic book could do that. And the comic book, I found, in some ways has a lot of freedom that a book or a movie doesn't have. Movies, of course, you have the limitations of your actors, you have your budgets that you have to deal with. Books, you have to try to describe every single image. And with a graphic novel, you don't have to. Instead, when you're sitting there and describing the scratch along the window pane, you can see the image of, the twisted, gnarled fingers that are scratching along the window. And it's even scarier in a lot of ways when you see these images and you're just entranced. And after that, I have been consuming graphic novels and comic books nonstop since then. Since that very first Zenescope booth, and since that very first Comic-Con, and gosh, since I was 4 or 5 years old watching that very first cartoon, I just couldn't get enough of it. So yes, I'm a comic book fan, and I love these stories, and I love getting to know new characters and new worlds and new stories, and breaking my own misconceptions, let alone bringing someone else into this world too. So that's what I kind of hope to achieve, is I hope that through these videos that I can help someone else try a new series, maybe have someone who's been reading them forever, and you can help, whether it's further the discussion, make some recommendations, or maybe there's something that I've read that you haven't, which I know for some of you that is probably not going to happen, but there's a hope. Maybe there's something in a series that I will like that you won't, and it will start an amazing discussion. That's the best time. So what can you expect from Browncoat Reviews? We are going to talk about books. We're going to talk about stories, we're going to talk about characters, and we're definitely going to talk about art. So I'm going to give a lot of in-depth analysis. I'm also going to be comparing different stories to see which ones did a better job, which ones did I like better? And then I also would love to hear from you all and hear what you thought. Did you like one version better than the other? Did one story maybe draw you into comic books more than another? Or is this the one version that you hate and I love? And it's okay, because that's part of the discussion. Another thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about where you can get some of these amazing deals for comics. So we're going to talk about warehouse sales. We're going to talk about local comic book sales. Of course, eventually we're going to go to the Ultimate Comics Raleigh location. And we're also going to talk about some eBay finds and, of course, subscription boxes. One of the last things I can't wait to share with you all is once a week, I'm going to share what I call cool collections. So we're going to talk about whether it's different artwork. This is an artist that I saw over at Comic-Con. Amazing guy. We're going to talk about whether it was really cool finds at Comic-Con, whether it's, obviously the Catwoman 80th anniversary covers, different covers that I've collected or my husband has collected. So I hope you join me next time here on Browncoat Reviews. Just remember to subscribe and hit the like button and join the journey. I'll talk to you all soon. Everyone meet Faith. Faith, would you like to look at the camera? If you gonna stay there? Greyhound Xing. Or staring. Really? Really?